that, I'm going to turn this over to Kathy Marcus, who is our moderator for today. Kathy?
Thanks, Lisa. I just want to welcome everybody on behalf of the COSA Education and Training Committee. When we were talking about seminars or webinars that we wanted to have this year, everyone wanted to hear about what kinds of training opportunities different state archives were making available. And I want to thank the presenters today for being willing to talk about the really different opportunities that are available in their different states. I'm going to start out by introducing each presenter and what they're going to cover. So we'll do that all at the beginning, and then they'll pass the baton on to each other as they go. So the first presentation that we'll be hearing is from Christine Wiseman. She'll provide an overview of the Georgia Archives Institute. It was established in 1967 as a basic training for staff at the Georgia Archives, and the Institute is now a separate nonprofit organization that's provided instruction to hundreds of individuals working in archives and libraries in Georgia, the United States, and beyond. Christine is head of digital services at the Atlanta University Center's Robert W. Woodruff Library, where she works collaboratively with library staff, the Archives Research Center, and faculties to deliver digital services in support of teaching, learning, and research. Previously, she has served as head of preservation and reformatting at the Georgia Archives and as a preservation officer for Solinet, now Lyrasis. Christine teaches on a wide variety of archives and preservation topics, including serving as a, thank you for forwarding my slides for me, teaches on a wide variety of archives and preservation topics, including serving as an adjunct instructor for Clayton State University's Master's in Archival Studies program since 2010. In addition, she's the board chair of the Georgia Archives Institute, and she was the 2011 president of the Society of Georgia Archivists. She holds an MLS and a Certificate of Advanced Studies in Preservation Administration from the UT Austin and a BA in English from St. Joseph's University. Our second presenter is Jodie Foley, and she will discuss Montana's use of the Student Archivist program, also sometimes called the Traveling Archivist program, to provide real-world experience to graduate students while giving local heritage organizations much-needed professional archival training. Jodie has served as state archivist for Montana since 2005. A Montana native and alum of the University of Montana, she was hired as an archives tech in 1990, but also served as oral historian and manuscript archivist. She is currently serving as COSA's president and has been active in that organization since 2005 as well. And our final presenter will be Beth Golding, and she'll discuss how the Florida Bureau of Archives and Records Management provides training in managing historical records collections and management of Florida's public records. She's the state archivist and bureau chief of the Archives and Records Management in the Division of Library and Information Services, Florida Department of State. She has over 35 years of experience as a professional archivist, primarily with the State Archives of Florida since 1995 and the New York State Archives, conducting and managing archival appraisal, collections management, and reference programs, as well as records analysis and records management training programs. Beth has spoken at a number of archives and records management conferences, workshops, and taught archives management courses for 23 years through Florida State University's Public History program. She holds memberships in several professional organizations and served as president, secretary, director, and program chair for the Society of Florida Archivists. Beth has a master's degree in history from the State University of New York at Albany. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Christine Wiseman.
Okay, thank you so much, Lisa and Kathy. Thank you to COSA for inviting me today. It's great to be here, and it's great to be back with COSA. I worked with COSA very closely for many years when I was at the Georgia Archives. In fact, Vicki Walsh and crew were in our building for several years. You probably all know that. And I worked with them very closely on disaster planning projects after Katrina, both the IPER project, the PREP. So it brings back a lot of great memories of all that collaborative work, and I'm so glad that COSA is going strong and still doing great training, and I'm pleased to be here today to talk about the other hat that I wear, which is board chair of the Georgia Archives Institute. I got involved in the Institute when I was at the State Archives of Georgia. Started out as an instructor. I taught the preservation portion for quite a while, and then after I left the position there, I continued to teach for a little bit, and then I morphed onto the board. Now I don't have to teach anymore, but I just make sure everybody else is teaching. So it's a great organization. The Georgia Archives Institute is a 501c3 organization. It is a 2-week archival institute that's held every June in Atlanta. And we have educated over 868 students over its long history. Sadly, we had to cancel this year, obviously due to COVID-19. It was the first cancellation in the 53-year history of the Institute. Due to the internship portion of the Institute, which I'll talk about in a bit, it's such a major component of the program, we decided that we really couldn't move it online in such short notice. We had already received applications, so we offered all applicants from 2020 to keep their application in for next year, if they wish. We returned deposits, and we hope to have the same faculty return next year. I did confer with some colleagues at the Western Archives Institute, and they canceled theirs as well. So it was a hard decision to make, but of course, really, we had no choice. So that being said, we've shifted our goals a little bit. We're focusing on writing a diversity statement and redesigning and launching our new website, which I think I skipped ahead one, which actually this is one of the images from our new website, which will launch later this fall, and it's georgiaarchivesinstitute.org. So as I said, we are a 501c3 organization. We are administered by a board of directors. You can see this is members of our board from last year, just about the same members that we have this year, pictured there. They are representatives from area archival organizations. We have several co-sponsors that we formalized relationships with recently. One, of course, is the Georgia Archives, who's been long involved in this institute, the Society of Georgia Archivists, or SGA, and FOGA, the Friends of Georgia Archives and History. So the Georgia Archives provides the classroom space every year for the Institute, and a staff person from the archives is always on the board and helps tremendously with the on-site logistics and the breaks and coordination during the 2 weeks when the students are on site. So that's very valuable. The Society of Georgia Archivists, they help. They have a liaison on the board. It's generally the chair of the education committee. They attend the meetings. They serve as a non-voting member, and they help with tours and promotion of the Institute. And then the Friends of Georgia Archives and History, they provide a scholarship. And we also have a number of very important corporate sponsors and supporters who help keep the costs down for students. So as Lisa mentioned, the Georgia Archives Institute was founded in 1967 by Carol Hart, who was the director of the Georgia Department of Archives and History at that time. Lacking the funds to send staff to the National Archives Institute in Washington, D.C., Ms. Hart brought in prominent archivists to teach archival theory and the role of the modern archives. She saw the need for basic instruction for beginners in the profession. At first, the program was intended for Georgia Archives staff only, but soon after, it was expanded to include attendees from all over the state and from other institutions. The first official session was August of 1967. It actually lasted for an entire month, and the students traveled all over the state visiting different repositories, courthouses, and other institutions housing records. And you can see this article from the paper shows some of the early students visiting a record center in one of our counties in Georgia. Today, the Georgia Archives Institute is recognized throughout the archival community as one of the primary vehicles through which beginning archivists and students can learn theoretical and practical knowledge about modern archives. Many types and sizes of archival and educational institutions continue to be partners in the Institute, ensuring that students are exposed to a broad range of perspectives and thus will be adaptable in the workplace. We celebrated our 50th anniversary in 2017, and in 2016, we were awarded, the GAI was awarded the SAA Award of Distinction. So our application process, we accept 20 students a year, but it is a competitive process. We are averaging 35 to 40 applications per year. So we do have a selection process. The deadline, we just moved it back recently, but it's March 15th each year for June. The cost is $500, plus students also pay for lodging and transportation. That tuition has not gone up for many, many, many years, and we're trying to keep it as low as possible. And we do that through our partnerships and having sponsors. And as I mentioned, we have several scholarships. We now have 4 scholarships. So we have one from the Society of Georgia Archivists, offers a scholarship, the Friends of Georgia Archives and History, which I already mentioned. The Georgia Historical Records Advisory Council has a scholarship. And then the newest one, which we just added, is Georgia Public Library Services. So they focus on a scholarship for a student who works in a public library but works with archival records. So the intended audience of the GAI is really it's supposed to be basic training. So we look for applicants whose jobs may require a fundamental understanding of archival skills, but they have little or no previous archival education, or those who have expanding responsibilities for archival materials, or those who may have may be practicing archivists but really haven't received a lot of formal instruction and who really demonstrate a commitment to an archival career. Now, the Archives Institute itself doesn't make you an archivist, but it starts you down that path. So we do want to really look for students that are at basic level training. We don't want to, accept students that might be overqualified. And that is our class from 2019, shown on the staircase in the lobby of the Georgia Archives, which many of you are probably familiar with. Although most of the applicants are from Georgia and from the Southeast, we don't limit applications to Georgia by any means. And since 1967, we've had students from 39 states and many different countries. What types of organizations do our students come from? Since 2001, the patterns look like this, and really almost half come from other types of educational organizations, colleges, universities, and private colleges. The next most common is sort of business organizations, archives, corporate, religious organizations. And then the last categories are pretty close in terms of the representation. We get, of course, people from state and federal government agencies. We do get some library school students and archival students. We get people from local governments and also historical societies and museums. So it's not just state archives, but certainly all different types of archives. Diversity, equity, inclusion is important to the board in the selection process. Over the past year, members of the board have been working on formulating a policy or a statement about our commitment to diversity. We conducted some research to see what other archival organizations, how they were addressing this issue, and we looked at ideas for reducing biases in our application and selection process and conducted a little bit of a self-study. This is an ongoing initiative, but this is a statement the board drafted, and it's going to go up on our website when that launches, the new website, when that launches in a few months. And some of the things we considered were reducing biases, expanding where we advertise the Institute, and making sure we're really broad in putting out the word so we attract a more diverse application pool. Maybe considering doing a blind review of applications, and also looking at issues of diversity within the board itself as well. So those are just some of the issues we're considering, and this, like I said, is ongoing. Moving on to the curriculum. As I think I mentioned, the Institute is held in June, every June for 2 weeks. The Georgia Archives provides the classroom space, which is wonderful. We generally have always had one primary instructor teach the first week of the classes, and then the second week there's 2 days of instruction where we bring in local experts. And then I'll talk about what happens the rest of that week. It is a lot of content for that primary instructor to cover, but we found that it really works well that the students and that instructor, because they spend 5 full days together, they really do form sort of a tight group, and they have a great rapport and feel very comfortable with each other by the end of that week, and it does work out really well. So we've stuck with that model. It's a total of 48 hours of classroom instruction. These are some of the main topics we cover. It's hard to get everything in. Again, we have to remind ourselves it's basic training. So we cover appraisal, accessioning, arrangement description, reference outreach and advocacy, special formats, security. We have a long session on preservation, almost a full day. And then we more recently added in digital archives and digital preservation content as well. We are continuously evaluating the content to make sure we can keep up with changes in the profession. As I said, new topics that we've added recently include advocacy-born digital archives and digital preservation. We try to incorporate lots of case studies, hands-on exercises when possible throughout the week, also tours, so that students are up and moving around and have opportunities to collaborate and network. And you can see pictured here, they do spend some time in the conservation lab of the archives, looking at demonstrations and practices by conservators, and also having the opportunity to actually handle some materials. We also build in several tours of area archives, as well as optional tours over that weekend that the Institute spans for those who stay in town for the weekend, which many do. We also have a reception one evening during the Institute where we invite members of SGA and other area archivists to come and meet the students, so it's a great opportunity for them to network. We also have all of our sponsors present at that reception, and we usually incorporate a tour it's hosted by an area archival institution, so they get to visit yet another institution, and they often get to take a tour of those facilities as well. So by the end of the week, they've probably toured 3 or 4 different facilities in the Atlanta area. Networking is really a major benefit of the GAI, and a lot of the students do keep in touch for many years after they attend. The highlight, I think, of our training is the internship. The internship takes tremendous commitment and support from area archivists to pull this off every year. So it's a 3-day internship in a local archives that the students participate in. So they spend 3 full days on site. Many of these institutions take students year after year. The board takes matching students to these internships very seriously. We make sure that we make really good pairings that benefit their interests and needs the most. It's not just a random assignment. Sorry, my phone's ringing. Students spend 3 full days at an area institution, and each person gets to process a collection and create a finding aid. After the internship, they return as a group for the final day of the institute, And you can see here they report out on their experience. Some do PowerPoint, some just provide a little overview. This gives all the other students exposure to all of the internships and also gives the students the confidence that they were able to put into practice, all the theory that they learned throughout that week. And they really enjoy the internship. So for a number of years, the Georgia Archives Institute board was run mainly by employees of the Georgia Archives. Priorities have changed, and a number of long-term board members retired. So, the format of the board has changed a little bit. So it led us to think about how do we sustain this organization, because it's a completely volunteer board. It's a lot of work to put this on every year. And, we just want to make, financially, we're quite stable. But so we've been looking at how to really make this more sustainable over time. And we've done that. These are some of the measures we've put in place. We've expanded the board to involve more area institutions. So we have a lot of representation now. In addition, of course, to the Georgia Archives, who are still very much involved. We've expanded the board position, so duties are more spread out to ensure that we have cross-training and it's easier for succession purposes if people have to roll off. We worked really hard to document our procedures so that, again, if somebody else has to take over a role, they have very clear information about what those duties entail. We share all that information in a Google Drive. We've drawn up formal agreements with our co-sponsors, which has really been helpful. And we're always looking for ways to save money, though we are financially in good shape. But one thing we did recently is we no longer print out all the handouts. We now provide everything electronically to the students. That saves time and money. So just things like that. We're looking for ways to, of course, reduce costs always. So what's next for the Institute? Just some things
Christine, I'm just going to interrupt you
over time.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
Why don't we save what's next for the question period that will be at the end? And thank you so much for your comments.
Absolutely.
So we'll move on to Jodie. And I just want to reiterate what Lisa said in the comments, which is that if you have questions now, please feel free to put them in chat and we'll come back to them. But maybe that'll give you an opportunity to write them down now.
Okay. Can everyone hear me? Are we good to go?
Yes.
All right, wonderful. Thank you. I want to say that Christine's program is amazing. I participated in the Modern Archives Institute on the West Coast, and there's a lot of things that are similar, and it's a really great program for me. So I definitely support that kind of intensive work for folks who don't necessarily go through a library program and just kind of find themselves doing archival work. So good afternoon, everyone. As mentioned, my name is Jodie Foley. I serve as the State Archivist for Montana, and I'm also the coordinator for the Montana SHRAB. The program that I'm going to be describing is funded by NHPRC state programming grants, and training is provided as well as oversight by SHRAB members and staff from the Montana Historical Society as part of our overall outreach activities. The program is really only one piece of many different kinds of tools that we use for training and consulting, but it's one that we've found very successful and hope to continue into the future, notwithstanding COVID and related bans on travel and such. But we think it's one that you could use locally and expand or shrink to fit your needs. So if I could have the next slide, please. The SHRAB conducted a survey as part of our strategic planning to determine the training needs in the state, and the survey told us that people wanted on-site help, I should say. Webinars, face-to-face training, consulting is great, but it was difficult for a lot of our folks to translate training into action in their particular facilities. So the training, the Student Archivist program and the training that is involved within that was developed to help, albeit on a very small scale. And I will say that Christine was talking about something that's very large and takes in the state and beyond. And this is very, very small. It's basically one student, one facility each year. So the challenges that we faced is finding trained archivists to do something on site. We have very few self-defined archivists within the state, and those that we do have, and by a few I just mean 15 to 20 at any given time, tend to be in universities or local governments or, as my case, the state archives, and we have travel budget issues. Usually the travel piece is the one piece that gets cut immediately whenever there's any kind of budget issues, so that's a constant issue. We also do not have an information sciences program in the state, so we can't create more baby archivists. So we needed to figure out how to lure people into the state who are trained archivists. Some things that we had to draw on was the fact that we had in the past a traveling archivist project and program. It was a full year program, very intensive. The traveling archivist went from institution to institution, one each month over an entire calendar year. So we had that kind of a model that worked pretty well for us. We had strong internship programs with from out-of-state universities in the region. And I should have changed that slide. It's no longer SNAP grants. That dates me by quite a bit. But these are the NHPRC grants, those kind of programs. So if I could have the next slide, that'd be great. So with those challenges in mind and with those potential resources to draw on, we came up with the Student Archivist program, basically building on the idea of a traveling archivist but fitting it into our limitations. Really, none of the SHRAB members could afford the staff or time to oversee a full-blown traveling archivist at the scale that we had done it before, nor would all of our needy institutions be able to partake in something through the winter. That was a problem for us because a lot of these institutions that have archives close part of the year. So what we thought about instead was to try and get a student in, and we're trying to think about how that would work. So we decided that if we could get a graduate student in for summer, an intensive 10-week internship, and they were a second-year student, so pretty close to finishing, so they would have the maturity in terms of their education and knowledge base to be able to help some of these institutions, that would be great if we could pull that off. So the student would be matched to an underserved heritage institution or local government. We knew that we wanted to pay the student because it's expensive to come to Montana. So what we figured out is if we could do about a $6,000 honorarium, that would get them close to a living wage for the summer, but we'd have to work within the contract rules for our state, which means they get paid a weekly wage. And then the matching would be from the SHRAB members and staff from our each institutions and from the folks in the institution that was hosting. In terms of the training piece of things, the SHRAB members would provide training. The largest part of that was for me or my designee to go with the student to the institution for 2 to 3 days, and the institution who has gone through the application process and has been selected, they know that they need to choose something that can be done within a 10-week time period. So it's a pretty discrete project, but there's often issues that they may not think about. So part of my training is to work with the student to look at that application, look at the materials that's actually there and the situation that it's in, and revamp and create, if necessary, a different workflow for the student. But then we also have a mentoring piece to this, which is additional training. And what that does is each week the student is assigned to one of the SHRAB members. And so for questions for that particular week, they go to that SHRAB member. and the SHRAB member will give them assistance. Sometimes they'll actually go on site and help them with whatever the particular project is. And then we also ask that the student, in terms of training piece, not only trains as part of the work that they're doing. You know, we're dealing with volunteers and often, or a very, very small staff. So they will in turn do training for, say, all of the volunteers within a given institution, or they will train the public on a particular topic. So that's all woven into the responsibilities for the student. We have a contract base on this, and they're very, very simple contracts, but they are very specific as to what the goals are. And they're meant to be pretty flexible. As I said, if there are any issues, we get in there and try to change things. Let's go ahead and do the next slide. So the overall goals for this are to promote, of course, archival work and the access and preservation to historic records in Montana. It's also meant to promote the archival profession across the state, and Montana as a great place to live and work. As I said, we don't have any kind of university coursework or certificate or anything that folks can get in the state to become an archivist, trained archivist. So if we can get folks through this particular program to think that Montana is a great place to come and work, all the better for us. We're also looking to provide outreach, of course, to our underserved locations, looking at providing expertise and hands-on assistance and real-world experience for graduate students. And I'd like to point out here that it really is real-world experience. You know, they get everything from the project could be, say, doing an inventory of the collections, because often what we're talking about is museums that have an archival collection that they really don't know what they have. It might be in 5 different locations across their museum because they're really artifact-based. So it can be very, very basic education, all the way to full-on processing for really good, really great material that just, they don't have this in particular institution, the host doesn't have the ability to get in and process. So the other piece is that part of the reason that we decided to go with students who have a little more experience is because of the kinds of institutions that they might go into. They're really going to get a lot of learning experience, but there's also some challenges. We also want to build on the existing relationships within the host institution's community. You know, teach them how to reach out to a local museum, library, local government, so that they can build on whatever education is provided and build on the program. Just build communication between all of those related professional organizations so that you have that growth beyond this particular project. Let's go on to the next one, please. So the strengths for this particular program is that we had really good relationships with some of the regional schools, Western Washington University being one of them, which sadly that program has closed, but that's where we started, and we were able to move from that relationship into relationships with the University of Washington, with Idaho, you know, all of the regions, and then also building out into those programs that are going online and being able to draw folks who are in Montana into this program to get some great experience as they're going through those programs for their information sciences degree. We also had active and willing SHRAB members with a lot of diverse experience, which is really important in the mentoring piece. We have folks who are in a university setting, local governments, libraries, the Historical Society here, and private entities as well. So that brings a whole host of diverse expertise that can be then shared with the institution, but then of course, also with the students. So we are in contact with some of these students even 10 years out. They will call back and say, what's a great resource for this? So it builds a kind of community, not only within Montana, but extending out. We worked really hard to get focused and achievable goals, and we do that through the application process, really having open communication with folks as they're applying, saying, no, you really do need to get that down to 10 weeks. No, that's probably not the best use of this, and no, artifacts aren't archived, all those sorts of things. So the SHRAB members are involved in that, the application review process as well. And I think the way that we've done this, we make sure that the student and the institution understands that they have to be flexible and they have to be able to change where needed to actually finish what they have set out to do. Go ahead for the next slide, please. Challenges for Montana. Big thing is that most of the institutions that really need this are going to be in very isolated areas. They're not going to have a lot of amenities. We call this the sushi factor. So if folks are looking for fine food, fine dining, anything like that in their internship experience, that's not going to happen. But we're very, very clear about that, and we give them information up front about the community that they're going to go to, and they understand, the students understand this is the setting that you're going to be in. There is a challenge for some of the host institutions. As I said, many are museums that may not have any archival training whatsoever. They're also highly likely to be volunteer-run, or they might be trained, but they're trained in museum studies or something like that, which obviously they're very different. There's some challenges sometimes dealing with really tight-knit family kind of things, if you want to say, within the institution. So there can be politics and conflicts, and that's part of the training that we try to provide up front, is how to maneuver that. And it's also part of our mentoring, being there to ask the questions and help intervene if we need to.
Jodie, you're out of time, so I was wondering if you could just wrap it up at this point, and so we can move on to Beth.
You bet. I'm sorry about that.
No problem.
I'm actually pretty close. So let's see. The biggest things is, we do have these challenges and these strengths, and just looking at really early and sustained communication and being realistic with the scale at which you can do things. But it is a very flexible system, and I'm happy to answer any questions at the end. So thank you so much. And now we move on to Beth.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I'm the last one, so I have to make sure we come in on time, and I'm going to do my best to do that. This will be sort of like a bullet train. I've got a ton of slides, but a lot of pictures and not too many words. So I think we'll get through this just fine. And trying to find there it is. Just very quickly, where the Bureau of Archives and Records Management is located within Florida government under the Florida Department of State, Division of Library and Information Services. The Department of State reports to the Governor's Office. So we're an agency of the Governor's Office and not an independent organization. So that does impact to some extent the types of activities and messaging that we can do. Just give you a sense of where we are in government. Bureau has 3 main program areas: the State Archives, Historical Records Collection, the State Records Center, which provides off-site and expensive storage for Tallahassee area public agencies, and the Records Analysis and Training Program, retention schedules, records management training, and so on. So those are 3 main program areas, and I'm going to start with our records management training, which we've been doing for decades, somewhere in the area of 40 years. Don't know exactly, but if I sound tired, that's the reason. This is a program that's been going on for many, many years and has expanded in scope and in the variety of types of trainings that we provide. Our full-day records management seminars are our old standard. A full day offered to any employee or officer of a public agency that we go around the state, usually between April or May and September or October, to locations all around the state, providing this training at a fee per person. All the fees that we collect go into a trust fund that funds many of our records management and related positions and services. It's not a profit-making scheme. It's basically cost recovery. We have classes that we offer tailored to specific agencies at a different fee structure, trainings for particular groups such as clerks of court or different types of agencies that request that training. We conduct webinars where we condense the seminars into online training that might be an hour, might be 2 hours, might be half a day, again, tailored to the needs of the group that we're presenting for. And Total Recall, Total Recall is our Records Center's inventory database, and we offer training to our Records Center customers. There's no fee for that. They're paying fees for record storage and other Record Center services, so we don't charge to train them in using the system that helps them to track their Record Center storage inventory. So really quickly, I will take you through how we do this records management training. The full-day seminars cover basic records management principles, and they're intended for anyone. They're a refresher for people who are familiar with records management. They're a great introduction for people who are new to records management, public records, especially people who come to government service from the private sector and have a very different experience of what it means to manage records and make them accessible. For new public agencies, when new agencies are established, which I don't think will be happening anytime soon, but it does occasionally, and those folks in those new public agencies, this is a great opportunity for them to learn about their public records responsibilities as well. And on our website, we advertise the schedule of seminars and give them links to an online registration opportunity. And of course, this screenshot is from a month or so ago when some of our seminars had been canceled, but not all. At this point, they're all postponed and will be rescheduled for next year. But we put up a schedule and allow people to register for these online. And we're covering basic areas such as what is a public record? What do we mean in Florida by public records? Providing examples of those. What are retention schedules and how do you use them? How do you properly dispose of public records? What are your requirements for providing access to public records? Guidelines for storing records, very basic introduction to electronic records and how to manage those, very, very basic. And generally, what are the responsibilities of public agencies relating to public records? And just real quickly, take you through a few of the slides in our presentation, our seminar presentation, which is also the basis of our shortened, condensed online presentations. Just to give you a sort of a sense of the way we're presenting content, the way we're presenting information, trying to make it really practical for people so they can understand the concepts based on what they're going to see in their agencies, what a record series is and how that relates to retention schedules and the scheduling of record series, rather than retention schedules. We don't set retention schedules for individual records, but for record series and what that means, and how to understand and use records retention schedules, how to legally and properly dispose of public records, and how to document that. We have in Florida a requirement for documenting the disposition of public records. So what does that mean? How do you do that? We touch a bit on archival records just so folks are aware out in the public agencies that they might have something that's worth a closer look as possibly worthy of longer term retention. So we go over just some basic information about that, the responsibilities for providing access to public records, confidential and exempt information that might cause some records to be restricted from public access, fulfilling public records requests, providing access, letting people inspect records and copy records, conducting a records inventory, properly storing records so that they're safe and secure. Again, a little bit about electronic records. Just a few basic concepts so people are aware. Email management, enterprise email management, or individual email management, how that might work in different agencies. General responsibilities that each agency has relating to public records, and the violations and penalties that are set out in Florida's public records law, relating to what is the penalty if you violate Florida's public records law. Someone in South Florida several years back, a public official was found in violation of the public records law, and their punishment was a fine and attendance at one of our records management seminars. So that's been one of our favorite stories ever since. But we want folks to know that this is the law. It's not just us trying to make them do things that they don't have time for. It is Florida law. And so that's very quickly our records management training. Archives training, we have just revamped a program that we had a number of years ago to offer full-day workshops in managing archives and historical records. This is very similar to what they're doing with the Georgia Archives Institute, but less intensive. One day, providing an introduction to basic concepts and core functions of archives programs. And you can see here the basic areas that we cover in this one-day workshop. Again, it's a very quick introduction to the profession, how it's different from libraries and museums, and what we mean by terms such as collections, archives, facilities, and programs, and the profession, what we mean by archives, why we have archives, our responsibilities for archives, the programs, different programs and components of archives programs, our collection development activities and why it's important to have a collection development policy. Really stress the importance of that, so we're not just collecting things at random. Appraisal, concepts of appraisal and what we're looking for when we appraise archival records, accessioning and arrangement and description, how we get records to the archives, take custody of them, and provide access to them, some of our favorite terminology in archives. A lot of what we're doing here, talking about managing the collections, providing access, finding aids, and a lot of what we're doing is trying to prevent people from doing harm, giving them basic guidelines. Here's what you can do, but here's what you shouldn't do. Being aware of preservation issues, access policies, and providing reference. Advocacy and outreach, making sure that folks are aware that that's an important component of an archives program. Sorry, something popped on my screen that I didn't want on my screen. Again, a very basic introduction to technology, both in the sense of how archivists use technology to further their programs and the impact of electronic records on our collections and how we manage those collections. Again, very, very basic introduction. Social media, digitization. So very quick, very basic introduction to electronic records and digital collections. Both these presentations are available if anybody's interested. I'll be happy to make them available to you, along with more about the curriculum, and this is my contact information if you've got any questions about how Florida provides training in archives or records management. And I'm going to turn this back over to Kathy now.
Wow, Beth, that was a lot of information. Thank you for sharing all that with us. And I just wanted to ask if there are questions from the audience. Go ahead and enter them into chat, and we'd be happy to read them out. I'm going to ask all the presenters one question while we hear from the audience, and that is, I don't know if all of you specified who conducts these trainings. Are they with the Georgia Archives Institute? I think Christine, you said that that there were people from staff who used to do it, and then you moved on from that. So who is conducting the training now, and are the staff still part of the presentations?
Sure, yeah, I'm happy to answer that. Our website, we have, we've listed all the trainers we've used over the year. Well, not all of them, but some of them. For a while, we were using, bringing in like library and archival professors, because a lot of those folks were free in the summer to do the training. So we've had a number of different, we always have a primary instructor, and then for a long time, just the preservation day was taught by Georgia Archive staff. And then since then, we've continued to have one primary instructor from outside. And then we do bring in somebody to teach preservation, a local conservator. And then we do use local archivists to teach the digital topics. So for many years, we had Kathleen Rowe teach, and she was wonderful. We've had Tim Erickson, Greg Hunter, and our current instructor is Pamela Hackbart-Dean. She is more, she's a university archivist, so we've switched gears just a little bit from state archivist to more of a broad university archivist background.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And Jodie, you had talked about the SHRAB members providing some mentorship and some guidance. I guess my question to you is, are all of your SHRAB members archivists?
Yes, they are. With the SHRABs, normally I guess each state's a little bit different, but the governor assigns folks to, or appoints folks to the SHRAB, and that's usually done from a list that we provide, and we do ask that they be either working archivists currently or that they have that training and that background.
Okay. Do they know what they're getting into when they join the SHRAB?
I have pretty good conversation with them. But like I said, there's only about 20 of us in the whole state, so we kind of know each other. And
right.
We've all taken interns to be on the SHRAB. So the folks are aware of the program and how much work, but also camaraderie comes along with it.
Okay, great. And Beth, what about you? Are the trainings that you offer, are they offered by regular staff, or do you have other people coming in?
Our staff does all the trainings. For our records management training, we have two of our records analysts whose primary responsibility is developing the curriculum and providing the trainings. And for the archives training, it's the full day workshop is conducted by two archivists on staff who switch off, who tag team. And there are three of us who are on that team. So any two of those three at any time would be available to provide that training.
Okay, great. So that's written up as part of their job descriptions, right?
It's not specified, but providing public services and public activities is part of our expected duties, and is of part of our actual performance expectations for our annual evaluation.
Okay. I thought I would give particularly Christine and Jodie a chance to talk about some of the things that we had to cut off, and I apologize for that. Christine, you were talking about what some of your future developments might be. Did you want to talk about those a little bit?
Sure. This was a list that I just sort of brainstormed quickly on my own. It doesn't represent anything that's in place or that the board has voted on, so it's really just sort of things that we talked about. Of course, the new website, that is happening, but we're going to continue efforts to diversify our applicant pool. We've talked a little bit about maybe doing some actual fundraising because we are a 501c3 and we really haven't done fundraising specifically. Not sure how that would happen, but it's just something we've talked about a little bit. One thing that comes up a lot is it is basic training, and there is a need for mid-career training. Could we provide some more advanced training in some way through partnerships with other organizations? So that's something that's come up over the years that we haven't really addressed because it's so much work to put the Institute on just once a year, but it is something that's needed for sure. But with SGA and other organizations, they fill that need as well. And then the other thing that I think with COVID is coming up is looking at a hybrid approach, perhaps, maybe moving towards partial online instruction paired with the on-site instruction, because 2 weeks is a long time for people to be away, and who knows now with the future what that brings. So that's something we've talked about as well.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Lisa, do we have time for more? Or there was one question that was asked from the audience, and that was for Beth. How many records management trainings do you perform a year in Florida?
The seminars, it's usually between 11 and 14, depending on how many hurricanes and pandemics we run into. It's usually in that area. The other types of training added to that, it could be between 50 and 70. We can easily do 2 webinars a week, and we get requests for them all the time.
Okay.
So it's a pretty constant, continuous operation on the online training.
I think it's amazing that you get people to pay for them. That was my reaction. I mean, it's great that you're making money, but we can barely get people to show up.
Yeah, and it's a cost recovery for us, and it's part of the reason that we had postponed all of our on-site seminars a while back, even before we knew that things would continue to be unsettled through most of the year. Because even if things opened up and people were willing to be in a room together, it was unlikely that government agencies were going to want to send people traveling or spend the money on that.
Right.
They're more willing to spend the money on something that they need, that their staff can sit in their offices or at home and have that opportunity.
True. Lisa, I'm going to just hand it back to you. I have one more question that I would ask, but do we need to move on to the ending comments?
Oh, I think we can do your one more question, or if you'd rather have Jodie finish up her little comments, we can do either of those things, no problem.
That's easy because that was my last question. Jodie, I was going to give you the opportunity to say you had your lessons learned slide and we skipped over it.
That's okay. Thank you very much. The lessons learned for this is that clear communication is really important. Doing the site visits really does help, not only with advancing the students' comfort, but also having that flexibility to change things if you need to. I also wanted to say that this is something that you can start really small and build up slowly. One of the things that we would like to do in the future is to expand this into different allied professions so that we could have a traveling rare books librarian or museum person traveling out with an archivist in teams to do some of this work. There's so much that needs to be done that I think we could expand that out to those other professions and really get some amazing work done. So that's kind of our goal for the future. And if folks are interested, please just give me a call or an email, and I can give you some of the sample forms that we used and descriptions of what's been accomplished during some of these projects. One project, they got almost 250 linear feet of material inventoried and processed during at a very high level, but it was amazing. They got it done. So thank you very much.
Thank you to all of you. And I just wanted to add, and I'm kind of speaking out of turn a little bit, but I consider these seminars to be introductions to the audience to contact our presenters and ask further questions. And I will bet that our presenters are going to be open to that. So just sort of as if you met them at SAA and then you recognized them at a reception and you went up and asked them questions. So please feel free to do that. They're contacts that you have now. And now I'm going to turn it over to Lisa, and thanks everyone for attending today.
Well, and thank you, Kathy, and I'd like to thank all our presenters today because great information. So while I'm going through these next couple of course, we have to have a few commercials. Well, I do that really quickly. Presenters, if you would go ahead and type your contact information in chat, that way people can capture it if they need to or want to get in touch with you. So the first thing I want to remind you is that if you enjoyed today's webinar or felt you got some information out of it, we have several more coming up. August is actually going to be CoSA's annual meeting work session. Those of you who've actually gone to an annual meeting in person may have attended one of these. But if you've never had that opportunity, this is your chance to be part of the work session for CoSA and find out what it entails. September, we're excited because we're going to have some SHRAB roundtables to talk about some very specific topics. And then at the end of the month, we're going to bring all that information back together and let you know what we discussed in the roundtables. October and November, we're going to shine the spotlight on our state archives. We're going to give you the chance to brag a little bit about what you've got. So we've got 4 different archives that are going to share some of their information. So I hope you'll join us to find out more about their programs. We also have a CoSANARA webinar coming up. We try to have these quarterly. Our next one's going to be August 20th, and it's going to be a presentation about the Obama Presidential Library, which is an all-digital library. So I hope you'll join us for that. We also have our SERI webinars, our electronic records initiatives, and August is about a new program called Move It, and so join us to find out a little bit more about what's going on with there. And then, of course, September is going to talk about new resources that are available. So these are also great learning tools. And naturally, nothing we do at CoSA could be done without sponsors and funders, and so we'd like to thank all of these people who help us by providing funds and resources so that we can do the job for you guys. We want you to stay connected, and there's lots of ways to do that with CoSA. So please don't feel to be shy. Come and get in touch with us. And we thank you for joining us today. And there is an evaluation at the end when you sign off. I do hope you will take a minute and do that because it really does help our education committee as they look to plan future webinars. We look to your feedback and we want to know what things you like, what things you'd like to see more of. So we'd like to thank everyone for joining us today. We hope you found it useful, and stay well, stay happy, and thank you so much, and we'll see you at the next webinar. Take care, everyone.